I get the feeling when people look on at governments and generally the technocrats, and we think, okay, they are making decisions because they have all this information and they're so bright and they're looking at the situation from a rational stand. There's only scientific decisions they're making. If you stop and think for 1 second, I don't know if you saw this clip. There was this guy, Scott Gottlieb. He was a former FDA. I don't know misspeak. I think he was the president or the chairman of the FDA at a point in time, or the commissioner, sorry, the FDA. He gave an interview on CBS sometime, and he was talking about the ruling, the social distance ruling, right? The guidelines given by the CDC in the United States, and he was basically saying that it was made up. Like, people think that the 6 feet comes from some sort of study that they conducted. That's like, completely arbitrary. He said actually they started with 10 feet. And then, well, because somebody, when they advised the White House that it should be 10 feet, somebody in the White House said, no, you're mad. It could be 10 feet. 10 feet. You can't do nothing with 10 feet. 10 feet, a business can't open. Right, well, they make it 6 feet. And then when they wanted schools to open, they bring it down to 3 feet.
The single reason why most schools remained shut was because the CDC was telling them they had to keep kids 6 feet apart. If CDC had said you have to keep kids 3 feet apart, then a lot of schools would have been able to open. And in fact, when the Biden administration wanted to open schools in the spring, this past spring, they got the CDC to change that guidance from 6 feet to 3 feet.
And you're right, the 6 feet was arbitrary.
The 6 feet was arbitrary in and of itself. But if the administration had focused in on that, they might have been able to affect a policy that would have actually achieved their outcome. But that policy-making process didn't exist. And the 6 feet is a perfect example of sort of the lack of rigor around how CDC made recommendations. Nobody knows where it came from. What? Most people assume that the 6 feet of distance, the recommendation for keeping 6 feet apart, comes out of some old studies related to flu, where droplets don't travel more than 6 feet. We now know COVID spreads through aerosols. We've known that for a while, so how operative is that? The initial recommendation that the CDC brought to the White House, and I talk about this, was 10 feet. And a political appointee in the White House said, we can't recommend 10 feet. Nobody can measure 10 feet. It's inoperable. Society will shut down. So the compromise was around 6 feet. Now imagine if that detail had leaked out. Everyone would have said, this is the White House politically interfering with the CDC's judgment. The CDC said 10 feet, it should be 10 feet. But 10 feet was no more right than 6 feet and ultimately became 3 feet.
There's different levels of evidence behind those recommendations and different levels of certainty. And when the agency's uncertain or is predicating a recommendation on less certain science, they really should be transparent around that so we can make an interpretation how seriously we want to take it. But they don't usually do that. I think they ought to be obligated to do that.
And he said, but it's 3 feet here in Trinidad for schools, right?
Okay.
Right. Which is, again, causing problems. And he said, and does this even make a difference? Because we know now that COVID is airborne. It's not, droplets traveling anymore. It's aerosolized. So what difference does even 6 feet make or 10 feet or 20 feet make anymore once it's airborne? This is, he was the commissioner of the FDA and he said that on CBS, not on some wacko website or some, you know what I mean? He said that to, I can't remember who was conducting the interview, but he said it on CBS. So when you are here thinking that these people are making science or rational decisions based on scientific evidence and data,
they write down the thing and put it in the bag, dog, and shake up the bag and pull it out.
It's all about what they could get away with, right? I could get away with this.